All right, I'm going to discuss how these tiles work. They're actually buttons, as you can see them over here on the right-hand side. They are P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, and so forth up through P12. All right, every one of them has a label embedded in it. All right, if you click on it, it'll actually highlight the label because the label fills the button. The button is actually behind the label, but the label is part of the button. So when you're doing this, be careful you're not editing or modifying the label when you really mean to be modifying the button. The buttons all behave the same way. They just have different media file content behind them. Okay, so we got the buttons, we got their labels. The label is where the name of the media file will be put, what it is you're going to play if you click that button. So they'll say label right now. This will be changed once the program runs, and they'll be filled in with the actual name from the media file. Okay, on top of each one of them, there are three separate labels, P1 time, time end, and time length. These are not part of the button. They're not in the button. They are just on top of the button. And these are where the numbers occur for what time the item is scheduled to play, how many seconds the item will last, and when the item will end. So that's what they are. They're on top. And you see again, there's a lot of them. But they're not actually part of the button, although they may look like they are. All right, those are the tiles in question. The tiles are linked to the rows in the edit panel. So each one of these tiles is connected to the edit panel. And if you remember the edit panel down here, see if I get it to switch over, these buttons down the side here. This button here is button 3. These are misnumbered as we went through. They're not sequential. Button 3, button 8, button 9, button, I guess, 10, and so forth, down through the last one, which is button 15, which is even separated a bit from the others, but doesn't really matter. But these buttons here and the tiles in the program buttons are connected. So if you click on one of these, it's the same as hitting the corresponding play. So P1 corresponds to, what was it? Don't even remember. Whatever the number was on the first one there. P3, I think it actually button 3. Yeah, button 3. There's a correspondence layout. It's in the code, you'll see it. But anyway, so likewise, if you click on one of the play buttons, it is the same as clicking on the tile. Clicking on one of them causes a color change. In the case of the buttons, when it's been played, it's the tiles when it's not been played, it's green, and when it's been played, it's sort of a burnt umber. And there's a similar color change in the edit panel. But nonetheless, and when you rearrange the contents get rearranged in both panels. So if you drag something from the bottom of the edit panel to the top, it also moves in the program panel. And the tiles corresponding move. So this makes things complicated for several reasons, because you've got multiple buttons linked together, you've got multiple signals that have to cross one another, and you have this problem of the numbering. The tiles are numbered 1 through 12, the play buttons are not. Okay, so anyway, that's where they are. The signals over here, let me just bring up. And again, I'll hit P1. Let me bring up the signals. Signals are fairly straightforward, at least the ones we're going to do right now. And there it is. P1 is its ID. That's its location. Every one of them has a location to fill out that grid. They use a CSS a label called tiles1. It's in gtk.css, and it gives the color and it gives the shape and so forth. Some of that's try to get a textured shape to the buttons. There's tooltips. The tooltips are the same for every one of them. Let's see. Otherwise, here's not much interesting. Oh, there's a size, 160 by 106. That creates the size into which the label expands. All right, over here in signals, we've got several here involving drag and drop, which I'm not going to cover right now. They're separate, and I think there's also further down here. Yeah, there's a scroll event on here. So there's several signals down here I'm not. The ones I'm going to talk about right now are, first of all, the button press event and clicked. And let's discuss what the difference is. When you move your mouse over something and you push either, my mouse says 2 buttons, and of course it has a scroll wheel, so that's actually a button too. But when you push one of the buttons, that's a button press event, when you push down a button. When you release the button, that's a clicked event. All right. So if I hold down the left button, that's a press event. When I release it, it becomes clicked. When you push down on something, on the button, the press event takes precedence. The signal for press event goes out first. And whatever you do in the press event handler, you can then allow the signal to be passed on to another signal handler. So in the case of a left click, which means to play the tile, or the media file whose name is in the tile, when you release the button, that goes to the clicked, and the clicked then processes the play signal, or it initiates the play. So we've got 2 separate sets of signal. The first one to be processed that comes through is the press event, and in some cases it will go to a clicked event. All right? Not all cases, because on the tiles you can left click to play, right click to see the media contents, the media metadata contents. So let me bring up the player here, and okay, let's bring up the program tiles. There they are. If I right click, that pops up, and it is the metadata from the file. There's not a lot of important metadata in this file. In some cases it would be, there's quite a bit. The album it may have come from, the author, the singer, whatever. There can be quite a bit of metadata. It depends on your files. However, if you left click, it starts playing, and I'll stop it from playing. But you see the color changed. And simultaneously over here in the edit panel, it changed color too, all right, because they were connected. So doing one does the other. Likewise, if I go over to the edit panel and I hold down the left button here and I drag it up to, let's say, the second place there, now Forever and Ever Amen is up there, you see over here it is as well. They are connected. So likewise, if I say Grandpa got run over by a John Deere and move that up there, and if you go over to edit, you'll see there's the song is up there now. So they are the 2 panels are connected, and that creates, issues inside the code. All right, how are the issues solved? Let me get this off the screen. Unfortunately, it has to be made really wide and everything. This is the file tiles-1-12.c, because there's another row of tiles down at the bottom. The top 12 tiles are the program tiles, and the bottom 4 tiles, scroll left to right, they're used for programming. They don't play things. The colors will change on those too. Anything that's been played, the color will change, or if it hasn't been played, can be played. Anyway, there's some scroll in this file here. There's some scroll information at the top. I'm going to skip by that. The bottom part of the file here is what we're talking about. First of all, we have the press event, and secondly, we'll have the clicked event. The press event are going to all look like on P1 button press event, on P2 button press event, and so forth. Since they're all effectively the same, they vary slightly. Probably could have been made just a single subroutine, but anyway, but then you'd have to have multiple entries anyhow. But nonetheless, I did it as a macro, as I did in the previous video. So the macro here is P button press. That's the name of the macro, and it receives the number, which is the number of the button. So you see down here we have the 12 numbers, the 12 buttons, or the 12, I shouldn't say buttons, I should say tile. The 12 tiles are represented. All right? So that's tile 1, tile 2, tile 3, tile 4, and so forth. So each of these invocations of the macro creates an instance of this function. So it's going to create 12 instances of that function, or the function that's defined inside the macro. Once again, with the macro, you notice the backslash at the end of the line. That makes it, that means it's all one giant line. It's a continuation. You have to do it that way. All right. How do we create the function name? The function returns G Boolean. The function is on P insert number, and that's how we insert a number or concatenate a number into the middle of a string. It's got that double pound sign, another double pound sign. This is is a C++ macro language. So that would be on P1. The 1 would be inserted, button press event. P2, button press event. That's how the number from the invocation gets inserted. And there's the parameters. The parameters of the button press event are the button itself, the pointer to the button, a GDK event button pointer, and user data, which I don't pass, so there's nothing there and I don't use it. All right, first of all, I check the event state against the GDK control mask. This is not something I'm covering right now, but this is asking the question of whether or not the control key has been held down. If you are clicking and simultaneously holding down the control key, this will be true. And that's used for dragging and dropping from one page to a different page, and not doing it right now. So if the control key is held down, then we look at some stuff. Otherwise, the control key is not held down, and we do some other stuff here, which involves, this whole sequence here is if the control key is held down. We're not worrying about that right now. So you will end up right here. All right, you'll end up right here in an ordinary button press. And it clears out the drag, target, and source, because we're not doing drag, target, and source. We just proved that because we didn't have the control mask hit. We changed the cursor to the default, which is top left arrow. That's the one I use as a default. That sets the cursor on your screen. We check to see if which button was pressed. If it's the left button, the value will be 1. The value will be 1, and we return false. Returning false from the event handler tells the system to continue processing the event. Okay, this was a left click. I'm not going to do anything here. It's going to be handled in the button clicked event further down. So if it's 1, it means it was the left button, and we return false. False means continue processing. Otherwise, I call a function called message, which will generate that blue screen, that little blue pop-up you saw a moment ago, which gives the metadata. And then I return true. Returning true tells the system we've done processing this event. Do not process it any further. Do not pass it on to anyone else. We're done. All right, so that's all it does, is except for this part up here, which is unexplainable, which is the special case of drag and drop. If you weren't holding down the control mask, the control key, then you move down here. It clears out the drag, drop, source, target thing, and resets the cursor, because the cursor would have been changed by the dragging and dropping, or could have been. And we check to see if to left click, proceed, move on. Right click, show the message, and when the message finishes, the program will now wait until you click the OK button on the message. And when that's been clicked, you come back here and we'll return true. Okay, and then we create 12 instances of this function, okay, for each of the 12 buttons. Then down here we have the button clicked. So in the case where we return false, because it was the left button that was pushed down and let go, it has to be released in order for the click to take place. That's when you hear the click. Anyway, you will come down, it will be a series of on, P, insert number, clicked, and it passes to you the pointer to the widget, or the, in this case, the button. That did in fact get clicked. All right, so that's again the concatenation. Now down here you see the button clicked invocation. This creates again 12 instances of this function. The first number is the P number, P1, P2, P3, P4. These are the tile numbers. The second number is the corresponding number for the play button in the edit panel. So in other words, P1 on the control panel, the tile P1, corresponds to the play button, button 3 on the edit panel. Likewise, button 2 or tile 2 on the control panel corresponds to button 8 on the edit panel, and so forth. That's the correspondence between the two. And so I pass 2 of them when I'm invoking or creating the macro. So the first one there is the tile number, P1. So on P1 clicked and so forth. What do? I invoke the function on button. Here insert the number from the edit panel, clicked. So the second number, number 2, is the number for the button on the edit panel that corresponds to the button on the control panel, the tile on the control panel. They're all buttons, really. Okay, so if we come down with 1, it'll be on P1 clicked. We'll invoke the function on button 3 clicked. Now I pass nulls. It's expecting to get addresses but the function in question doesn't use those addresses. If you look at the on button whatever clicked, you'll see that it doesn't make use of the parameters passed to it. It already knows where it is because of how it got there. So there it. So I'm just invoking what would be the event handler had you actually pressed the corresponding button on the edit panel. So and that's the function that handles it. So it's done over there, and all the things happen over there. So that's how they're interrelated. It's fairly straightforward. Now there's also scrolling, and the scrolling is more complicated, but it allows you to scroll back and forth through all the items. If I still get it up here, let me bring it up here, and let's see, bring up the front. So I'm just hovering over one of them. I'm playing with the roller on the mouse. That's scrolling. This is another form of scrolling. That's page by page. This scrolls too. So in other words, there's scrolling involved, which is we didn't cover here. So that's the scroll event that occurs when hovering over the button. So the button actually has, or the tile actually has, a scroll event associated with it. And you come down and invoke the scroll event, and the scroll event returns the value of a function. The function is scroll event. It's not here, I don't believe. No, it's in another it's someplace else. This is just the macros. But that's the scroll event. And there's also dragging and dropping, which I'll get to in a later video. It's a nightmare. But nonetheless, scrolling's not that bad. But the actual scrolling is done by a function called scroll event, and it's not in this file. Probably should be, but it isn't. All right, so that should give you an idea of how these work. There's a right click and there's a left click. Now, as it turns out, back here over in edit, I'm doing a right click. There's no right click over here. It doesn't handle right clicks. It only handles left clicks, which when you click, it starts playing. And you click this, it stops playing. And there you are.